This is Frank Islam, Chairman and CEO of FI Investment Group and your host of Washington Current Review, where we interview leading voices from business and politics that impact you, the viewer. Today, we are fortunate enough to have Seema Sirohi. She's a fine journalist, a great columnist, and she works for Economic Times of India. Thank you very much, Seema, for coming here. I appreciated that. So tell me a little bit about yourself. What I introduced to you, give me a little bit more in depth about your background.
Well, I'm a trained journalist. I've been working as one for nearly 3 decades, and I've been covering US-India relations for about 25 years.
You have seen your share of ups and downs. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Absolutely.
Okay, and so you are associated with Economic Times of India, which is the largest newspaper?
It's the largest economic paper, and I'm also associated with a think tank in Mumbai called Gateway House.
Gateway House, yeah. And that's, do they have any relationship with American think tanks also, or just that they're on their own in Mumbai?
They're independent in Mumbai, but they do a lot of work with American scholars.
Okay, good. I just went with Brookings not too long ago, and their think tank also. So, you alluded to the US-India relationship. They've been working for 30 years. Has it been progress over time? Tell me a little bit about it.
Absolutely. I mean,
give me a little bit of history.
There was a time when I first came here in 1988. Relationship was kind of not so good. We were called estranged democracies. We didn't talk to each other very much. And when we did talk, it was very testy. Over time, things changed, and now we are strategic partners, and Prime Minister Modi has said we are natural partners. So 2 democracies have finally found the way to each other.
They have a shared interest and shared values.
Yes, to a large extent.
Which is the democracy and diversity of both nations.
Absolutely. But apart from being 2 democracies, the strategic element is much more important, in my opinion, because our interests are converging.
Not diverging.
Not for the most.
In some cases, it is.
In a couple of cases, yes.
Yeah, we'll talk about the trade and investment. So, what was the key turn-on moment that occurred?
I would say the 2005 Indo-US nuclear deal.
So that was under George W. Bush administration?
Absolutely, yes. So that was a very definite breakaway point in our relationship. It showed to India that the United States was able to change 30 years of policy to improve the relationship, because the nuclear question always came in as a problem. No matter what we tried to do with each other, the fact that India was not part of the nuclear order became a problem. So they tried to change that, and they did.
And the Indian diaspora community played a very significant role in order to make that happen.
Yes, they did. They lobbied with the US Congress. They were important in changing opinions of even the US bureaucracy to a large extent. So they were a very crucial part of this development.
What do you think of the US-Iran nuclear deal?
I think it's a very good step forward.
Do you think we should sign it?
I think so. I think.
Do you think it's going to be passed?
There will be difficulty initially. I think it'll be rejected first, but then President Obama has said he's going to veto. And
override.
Then, the Congress doesn't have the votes to override his
well,
veto.
In the Senate they needed 33, and 145 they needed the House. And they already have about 27, so they needed 5 or 6 more.
Yes. So
do you think they will have a 67 even vote to even send that bill to the president? The president doesn't have to veto it? I don't think they do.
Well, let's see. I think
we'll wait and see.
Yeah, a lot of hectic lobbying is going on from both sides.
On both sides.
Yes.
And especially US-Israeli PAC pumping in millions and millions of dollars to change the opinion of the public as well as opinion of the congressional people.
Right. But I think it's important to bring Iran into the mainstream, given the turmoil in the Muslim world. You need
them to be a partner.
Then you need a Shia power to be part of the whole situation to balance what's happening there with ISIS. And they are the only ones who are ready to fight.
They are. And so you want them to be part of the global economic power as well as as a partner to fight against extremism and terrorism.
Right.
And so that the rocket would not rain in Jerusalem. Correct?
Right.
From Hezbollah, which is their allies. I want to shift a little bit about the Pakistan. Does U.S. policy towards Pakistan cast a shadow in India relationship?
It does, to
Why?
some extent, because the U.S. relationship with Pakistan is so entrenched, and Pakistan, as many countries have recognized over time, is the epicenter of terrorism. It sends jihadis out to India to attack India.
Which they did during the in Mumbai.
That was not the only time. That was the worst attack, but there have been many attacks over the years. Just recently, last month, there was in Udhampur and Gurdaspur. So,
But there are certain elements of Pakistan, they breed violence and they cater to the extremism and the terrorism, but not all the, if you talk to the elite part of the, and majority of the Pakistani, they don't feel that way. They feel the relationship with India is very important, they should be good allies.
yes, they can feel what they feel, but what power do they have to change the policy because the policy
Is
on
it policy, is it politics?
No, it's the policy towards India, towards United States, towards Afghanistan, three major issues, is controlled by the Pakistani army, not by the Pakistani Prime Minister. So the Pakistani army...
So army is calling the shot.
Absolutely.
And they have their own self-interest.
Of course.
Is it, I firmly believe, and I think a lot of people feel, it is in India's interest to make sure Pakistan is secure, is stable and prosperous.
Yes, but what can India do besides what it's already done a lot. It's offered trade, it has offered peace and friendship. It's the Pakistanis who keep carping on Kashmir and sending jihadis across the border.
So this is
you can't make peace and war at the same time.
Okay, and you believe that it's really their army who playing a major role in order to put a major roadblock into to renew the relationship between the two nations.
Yes, because Nawaz Sharif clearly wanted the economic relationship.
I think you're right, and he doesn't have the power, obviously.
He doesn't. He was
and he's elected by the people.
Yes, but the civil-military relationship in Pakistan is extremely complex, and the balance is in favor of the military.
This is how you see it.
This is how most people see it. I'm not the Pakistan expert, but you can read any American scholar. This is a conventional wisdom. I'm not saying anything sort of terribly new. It's what everybody believes, including the U.S. government.
Yeah. And I don't work for the United States government. I don't speak on their behalf. So I think your message is clear on this thing, and they need to make sure. I firmly believe it is in India's and Pakistan's interest to work together. They have a shared goal and shared responsibility.
Those are just words at the end of the day. If you don't see change in policy, we can keep talking, but nothing will happen.
It's all hollow, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the rise of China. Does that play into the U.S.-India relationship?
Significantly, because the rise of China has got everybody concerned, because no country is sure that the rise of China will be peaceful. China is showing a lot of aggressive behavior in South China Sea. It's sending its troops across the border into India. It's threatening Japan. It's threatening the Philippines, Vietnam. So the rise of China is a big question. It is the next superpower. We don't have any doubts about that. So obviously the United
Next superpower economically and militarily?
Both. It's expanding militarily at a tremendous rate. So the United States is concerned because its primacy in the Asia-Pacific region is threatened now because China is just coming along very fast. It's buzzing American ships all the time in the oceans. It's coming into the Indian Ocean. So India is extremely concerned. It's sending submarines to Pakistan, to Sri Lanka. So it is in the interest of the United States and India to sort of come together and think about how to counter this. Because nobody, as I said in the beginning, nobody is sure that China will be peaceful and will accommodate other nations' interests.
As long as this repressive regime exists. There's no democracy in China.
Yeah, it's a communist party system, but the whole world has kind of accepted that. It's not as if Chinese communists are disliked by the Americans. They're not. The Soviet communists were. But the Americans trade with China. They have a good relationship for the most part on the economic front.
We have a trade deficit with them of $1 trillion, as a matter of fact, since
Right.
2007, which is a pretty big deficit. Let's talk a little bit about the challenges in the U.S.-India relationship. Most of the American companies, including when I went with President Obama with the India CEO conference in January of this year, talked a little bit about how hard it is to do business with India. Is it true?
Yes.
It is true.
India has a lot of bureaucratic hurdles that American business or even Indian business
they can't do business, right?
They have to overcome. You need many permissions. You have to go to many government offices. So the Prime Minister has said he's trying to change all that. So as far as Washington is concerned, they're waiting and watching because they were very heartened by the fact that Modi was so welcoming to American businesses. But the situation on the ground hasn't improved dramatically as people expected. So it's...
We can't do wonders in 1 year.
Exactly.
But he's a pretty disciplined and business-friendly person.
He is himself.
He's
But...
but his people not.
But the systems in place will take some time to change. And there's some degree of disappointment in Washington with the reforms process.
You're talking about economic reform?
Yes, because Modi had such a massive mandate, so he could have done more. But what the path he has taken is sort of incremental, small steps, a lot of them. And then he hasn't managed his parliamentary majority properly.
You're talking about the Rajya Sabha?
No, even in Lok Sabha,
Lok Sabha.
He seems like behaving as if he's not in majority.
And he is in majority.
So the Congress party with 44 MPs is holding him hostage, which is ridiculous. So
the minority is calling the shot.
to some extent, and it's a big surprise to a lot of India watchers.
So you're really blaming the Indian bureaucracy because of the fact that they're corrupted and they obviously are not very business friendly, and you mentioned it takes many steps in order for you to start a business or to reignite what you call the business sector.
Yes, I'm not saying they're corrupted or anything. I'm just saying
But there's a lot of corruption in India that you have
there's
to...
corruption everywhere. So let's not use the word corruption only in the context of India all the time. That I know is very easily done in this town. I resent that.
Okay.
There's plenty of corruption in the system in the United States. It is called lobbying. Billions of dollars exchange
Yes.
hands. So just because, and super PACs, what else is that but corruption?
Well, they're undermining the political process, and they're
Yeah.
corrupting the political process. Yes.
So
You're talking about super PAC? Yes. They're undermining the
so
democracy.
just because it's legal and it's on paper doesn't mean it's not corruption. The influence of big money in this system is enormous. In India, it's also a problem. Nobody's denying that there isn't corruption. But to define a whole country by that one word, I do not like that. I don't do that.
So Prime Minister Modi has been there for about 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the style of government, and what has he done to accomplish so far for 1 year?
I think the best thing he has done so far is to revive the interest in India. He's been so enthusiastic and so hardworking. He's visited, I don't even know, I can't keep count.
How many countries he has visited?
I think it's over 35 or something like that.
So he's being a good ambassador.
He's been amazing on that front because under UPA 2, the interest in India had diminished.
Yeah.
And nobody was kind of bothering with India anymore. The India story was not being heard. So Modi, what he has done most importantly is to just rejuvenate everything.
And reignite it.
Yes. And that's important because people are once again looking at India with open eyes. Now the big issue is that he should deliver. He's promised a lot. Now it's time for delivery.
He got to match his words with his deeds.
Yes.
Do you think he will deliver?
I hope so.
The time will tell.
As an Indian, I can only hope.
The
Because
hope is the mother of all men, I guess. That's the best way to describe it.
yes.
What about the Prime Minister Modi, the government, in terms of the, and the President Obama alluded to that when he was there, in terms of freedom of faith and not being an inclusive society, not giving opportunity to all, regardless of caste, creed, religion, race, and background or belief. And it's not the Prime Minister Modi himself. Obviously, there are elements in his party that makes an inflammatory statement which is not very inclusive. And India has always been the beacon of a democracy and diversity and secularism.
Yes, but
Can you shed some light on that?
there's no question that this whole BJP family that
BJP,
we,
is that what you call BJP family? RSS is the same thing? Are they interchangeable? They're synonymous?
they're not interchangeable.
They're not synonymous?
They're not synonymous, but they are part of the larger parivar or family, and there's no question that the atmosphere for minorities has been vitiated because they are feeling threatened.
Why do they feel threatened? If the rising tide lifts our boats?
Yes, but it is not rising yet. And on top of that, there's a lot of, feeling that the Hindutva, the right-wing Hindus, the strong-armed groups such as Bajrang Dal and groups like that are wielding far too much influence now and threatening people, and that's not good. Just two days ago, a very big intellectual of Karnataka was shot down at his home because he had written against right-wing extremism. So we have to watch out for that. We are a country with minorities, with so much diversity, we don't know how to manage that. The best way to be together is under, a secular system. So you can't have this sort of dominance of the Hindu right wing. It's not good. It cannot work.
How can society flourish if they're not part of the social, economic, political fabric of their nation? If they succeed, India succeeds.
Exactly.
All of us succeed.
So if 14% of your people are Muslim, you can't wish them away.
Yeah, that's exactly. They're not going anywhere.
They're not going anywhere. And
so why can they think that they need to exploit their fullest potential, give them opportunity to succeed? When they succeed, India succeeds, the world succeeds. And they can change the political landscape.
So next time you meet Mr. Modi, you should ask
I
him.
did ask him when I was there last time to extend your hand, your help, and your hope to the people who have no voice and who are helpless, because the fact that you are the Prime Minister of all the people, regardless of the caste and creed. It's just not the Muslims, obviously the Christians and also the Dalit, which is the lower caste, are feeling the brunt of this inflammatory statements from the other side.
Yes.
I don't know much.
They have to be curbed. It is not good for India in any way. It's not good for its image. I mean, to have President Obama lecture us was not a good feeling for most of us, because we already know that all faiths must be respected.
And do they believe with the freedom of faith? I mean, that's a part of our constitution in this country. Do they feel that the inclusive society can prosper, and if you give them the opportunity and they can succeed? And so India succeeds. You're talking about 200 million Muslims there, and there are 50% of the young generations there. If you give them opportunity, they can do wonder.
Of course. And the fact that Indian Muslims have largely stayed away from all of
from the political engagement.
No, stayed away from all the extremism in the world.
That's exactly right.
It is an amazing reality.
Good point you made.
And we have to be extremely conscious of that, and we have to keep it that way. And that, I think, is what the Prime Minister should really focus on, to keep our communities,
to keep them together, because they have a shared goal and shared responsibility and shared sacrifices.
Yes. And the Vice President has said that Indian Muslims...
and Mr. Ansari.
Yes, Mr. Ansari has said that they need affirmative action and like they need more help, the Muslim community, I think it would be good for the Prime Minister to pay attention. But his followers are all over the place denouncing the Vice President. And so, I mean, this
So
kind of-
anything that doesn't favor them, they don't like it, they speak against it. Is that what it is?
Yes,
Uh-huh.
yes. I mean,
But are they well educated? Why they do things like that, which is not consistent with the vision and the values of India?
there is, it take a long time to answer that, but there is a feeling among a section of the Hindus that, the Muslim community has got too many favors.
Okay.
And
There's resentment.
there's some resentment. And
It's an entitlement they think they have.
right, and then they also feel that they support Pakistan in cricket matches and things like that. So it's somewhat silly things like that that have sort of taken hold. And conversions, the spread of madrasas, the spread of sort of a more fundamental Islam in India is also a matter of concern.
And it's a factor, obviously.
Yes, and on that I would say that yes, I think the government of India ought to be concerned about the kind of money that flows in from places like Saudi Arabia.
And they're the one who, the Wahhabi faith, they're trying to spread that faith.
Yeah.
And obviously they have stopped it, as I understand. They're not doing as much as they used to do.
No,
this-
it
I have
flows.
no clue.
There is no way to control it because our systems are not in place. The Americans can't stop Saudi money coming in. There's through charity it comes. You can call anything charity and send money.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your views with us, Seema, and it was nice to chat with you and share what you believe in it, and that's a wonderful thing to do. And thank you for what you do for our
Thank
country
you. Thank
and
you.
for our community as a journalist and as a columnist, and your views are important to all of us.
Thank you.
And this is Frank Islam wishing you a great week, and thank you for watching.